Hello students. First of all, welcome to our YouTube channel of Sangli Shikshan Sanstha. Today we are going to learn second lesson of 8th standard English 1.2 named as Dick Whittington and his cat, which is in unit 1. It tells us about the rise of Dick Whittington from a poverty-stricken childhood to the post of Mayor of London. It is an inspiring story and has a strong message to convey. So let us start our lesson. There was once a poor boy called Dick Whittington who lived in a small village in the south of England. He had no proper home, for both his parents had died and he was unkindly treated by many of the villagers. One day, Dick overheard someone say that the streets of London were paved with gold, and he decided that he would go there at once and pick his fortune up in gold pieces from the streets. For he thought people might treat him more kindly if he were rich. So in this paragraph, who was Dick and what he wants to do, that is coming in this paragraph. So the Dick was a poor boy who lived in a small village in the south of England. As he had no proper home because both his parents, means mother and father, had died. And so that's why he was unkindly treated by many of the villagers. So one day Dick overheard means heard by someone. So one day Dick heard by someone that the streets of London were paved with gold. Paved means covered with gold. So he decided to pick his fortune up in gold pieces from the streets, and he decided to go to London. And he thought that if he became rich, then the people treat him very kindly. So young Dick set out to walk to London. He had not gone far when a man in a cart stopped and asked him if he was running away from home. "I have no home," Dick answered. "I am on my way to London to find my fortune." "I am going to London myself," said the carter. "Jump up here beside me and we will journey together." So on the way to London, as he had not gone far, one man in a cart stopped him and asked if he was running away from home. But the Dick answered to him, "I have no home and I am on my way to London to find my fortune." The carter said to Dick, "I am also going to London." So the carter said to Dick, "Jump up here beside me and we will journey together." So they both arrived in London just before nightfall, and the carter left Dick and made his way to an inn. Poor Dick stood alone and looked around him in dismay. Where was all that fine gold? All he could see were dirty streets and lots of unfriendly people. He had nowhere to sleep, and in the end he spent the night in the corner of an alley, where he hoped he would come to no harm. So when Dick arrived in London just before nightfall, the carter left the Dick and made his way to an inn. But the poor Dick stood alone and looked around in a dismay. Dismay means very great disappointment. So why he became sad? Because he thought that when I came in London, I found a gold in the streets of London. But what is the real or actual condition here? As he see only the dirty streets and lots of unfriendly people only. He could not find the gold in the streets of London. As he spent the night in the corner of an alley. Alley means a narrow passage between or behind buildings. So he spent his whole night in the corner of an alley, where he hoped he would come to no harm. The next morning, Dick woke up cold, miserable, and very hungry. He wandered around begging for food. But again and again, people shouted at him, "Go away, you lazy fellow, be off with you," and aimed angry blows at his head. At last he collapsed in the street and lay there, too weak to look further for food. So when the next morning Dick woke up, he feel very cold, miserable, and very hungry. As he wandered around, begging for food. Begging means requesting for food. But again and again, people shouted at him. They gives a very bad treatment to Dick. Said to Dick, "Go away, you lazy fellow, be off with you," and aim angry blows at his head. In this way, they gives a very bad treatment to Dick. So at last he collapsed. Collapse means fell down in the street and lay there. He became too weak because as he not get the sufficient food for eating, that's why he became too weak and was unable to look further for food. By chance, Dick had fallen in front of a house belonging to a rich merchant called Mr. Fitzwarren. The cook was trying to drive away Dick. When Mr. Fitzwarren returned home from inspecting his ships, he stopped and said to Dick, "Why don't you work if you need food?" So by chance what happened? The Dick fallen in front of a house which belonging to a rich merchant named as Mr. Fitzwarren. The cook of the Fitzwarren was trying to drive away Dick. But when Mr. Fitzwarren returned home from inspecting his ship, inspecting means observing his ships, then he stopped and said to Dick, "Why don't you work if you need food?" "I would work," said Dick, "but I know nobody who will give me anything to do." "Take him into the kitchen," Mr. Fitzwarren ordered the cook. "Feed him first and then find some work for him." So, in this way, the Dick was given a home and a living, as Mr. Fitzwarren helped Dick as he offered a job to Dick, and also he gave a home. So, Dick was given a home and a living from Mr. Fitzwarren. He had a small corner of the attic to sleep in, and his job was to help the cook with all the pots and pans in the kitchen. Dick's life should have been much better than before, but he still had two difficulties to face. So in this way, Dick was given a home and a living by Mr. Fitzwarren. He had a small corner of the attic. Attic means a very small room inside a pointed roof. So he had a small corner of the attic to sleep in, and his job was to help the cook with all pots and pans in the kitchen. And now Dick's life should have been much better than before, as he got the home and also a living. That's why his life became now much better than before. But he still had two difficulties to face. So what are that two difficulties that are given in next two paragraphs? So the first was that the attic he slept in was overrun by rats and mice. At night they scampered all over him and kept him awake. But after a time he solved his problem by saving the few pennies he was paid and buying himself a cat. In no time at all, the cat chased away all the rats and mice, and Dick was able to sleep peacefully. So in this paragraph, what was the first difficulty of Dick that was given? So the first difficulty of the Dick was that the attic. Attic means a very small room inside a pointed roof. So the attic that he slept was overrun by rats and mice. This was the first difficulty of Dick. That all rats and mice, at night they scampered. Scampered means ran here and there, all over him and kept him awake. But after some time, the Dick solved his problem by saving the few pennies he was paid and buying himself a cat. So in no time at all now, the cat chased away all the rats and mice, and now Dick was able to sleep peacefully. So in this way, Dick was overcome to the first difficulty or problem. The other difficulty, which was not so easy to overcome, was the cook's bad temper. She shouted and screamed all day and would scold Dick and hit him with the wooden spoon, even when he was working as hard as he could. So the second difficulty was the cook's bad temper, the cook's bad behavior, which was not so easy to overcome. Overcome means succeed in dealing with the problem, because the cook shouted and screamed all day and would scold Dick and hit him with a wooden spoon sometimes, even when he was working as hard as he could. One night, Dick decided he could stand it no more. Early the next morning, before the cook was up, he set out with his cat to seek his fortune elsewhere. The two of them walked as far as Holloway. On their way out of London, then Dick sat down on a stone to rest. It was the 1st of November, All Saints' Day, and the church bells were ringing. As Dick sat and listened, it seemed they were ringing out a message for him. Turn again, Whittington, thou worthy citizen, Lord Mayor of London. So see, as the Dick was troubled by a cook, so that's why one night he decided he could stand it no more. So early the next morning, before the cook was up, he set out with his cat to seek his fortune elsewhere. So they both, Dick and his cat, two of them walked as far as Holloway on their way to London. And then the Dick sat down on one stone to taking a rest, At that time, the day was 1st of November, means All Saints' Day, and the church bells were ringing at that time. And the church bells were passed out some message for the day. And what was that message? Turn again, Whittington, thou worthy citizen, Lord Mayor of London. Means the message passed out by the church bells were tell to Dick, turn again, Dick, because you are a worthy citizen of London, and in future you became a Lord Mayor of London. Lord Mayor of London, said Dick, I should like to be Lord Mayor and ride in a fine coach. I can put up with a few scoldings from the cook, and if that is what is in store for me. So Dick and his cat retraced their steps to Mr. Fitzwarren's house. Luckily, they were able to slip back before they had been missed. So see here, because of the message, Dick changed his decision. He again decided to turn to Mr. Fitzwarren's house. And luckily, they were able to slip back before they had been missed. Now Mr. Fitzwarren used to send ships far across the sea to trade with other countries. He would load a ship with goods for the captain and ship's crew to sail in faraway places, and then they would bring back goods that could be sold at home. So this was the Mr. Fitzwarren business, that to send ships far across the sea, to trade means business, to do the business with other countries. And now he would load the ship with the goods for the captain and ship's crew to sail in a faraway places. And then they would bring back goods that could be sold at home. One day he called the household together. I am sending a ship to the African coast to trade. He said, would any of you like to send something of yours on it? You can then share in the profits if the voyage is successful. Everyone produced something except for Dick, who had nothing to offer. Have you nothing of your own, Dick? Asked Mr. Fitzwarren kindly. And Dick replied, only my cat. So see, what happened? One day Mr. Fitzwarren called household together and said to all, I am sending a ship to the African coast for trade, means to do business. So he said, would any of you like to send something on yours on it? So if you can then share in the profits if the voyage is successful. Everyone produced something. Everyone decided to give something, but except Dick, because Dick had nothing to offer anything. Have you nothing to offer your own, Dick? Asked Mr. Fitzwarren kindly. Then let your cat go on the ship, said Mr. Fitzwarren. His daughter Alice said, Dick loves his cat. Let me put something in for him. But her father said, no, it must be his, not something belonging to someone else. So Mr. Fitzwarren permitted to Dick to give his cat on the ship. But his daughter Alice said, Dick loves his cat so much, so let him put something in for him. But her father said that, no, his cat is his own property, so he not something belonging to someone else. It must be his. So Mr. Fitzwarren allowed his cat to go on the ship. So Dick fetched his cat and said goodbye to it. Sadly, the captain of the ship was delighted, for the cat was an excellent mouser, and so he had no trouble with rats and mice on his voyage. So the Dick fetched his cat and said goodbye to his cat very sadly, because he loves his cat so much. So the captain of the ship was very delighted. Delighted means become very happy. Because for the cat was an excellent mouser. Mouser means an animal that catches mice. So the cat was an excellent mouser. And so now he had no trouble with rats and mice on his voyage. After some months, the ship arrived at a place on the African coast, Barbary, where people called the Moors lived. The captain sent a message to the king to say he had fine goods for sale, and he was invited to the palace to show them. While he was talking to the king and queen, some dishes of food were brought in, but almost immediately rats and mice ran up and before the captain's eyes ate all the food. The captain was astonished and asked, This was what normally happened? So see, after some months the ship arrived at a place of the African coast Barbary, where the people called the Moors lived. So the captain of the ship sent a message to the king that he had the fine goods for sale, and he was invited to the palace to show them. As the captain of the ship was talking to king and queen, at that time some dishes of food were brought in, but almost all the dishes were ate by all the rats and mice. And the captain was very surprised to see this and asked to them that this was what normally happened. Alas, yes, came the reply. The country is suffering from a plague of rats and mice, and we cannot get rid of them. Plague means here a thing that causes great trouble. So the reply has come to captain that the country is suffering from the trouble of rats and mice, and we cannot get rid of them. We can't get a solution. I think I may have the answers on my ship, said the captain. And he sent a message asking for Dick's cat to be brought to the palace. More food was laid out, and the rats and mice appeared as before. The cat immediately pounced, killing at least a dozen before they scattered. Everyone was delighted, and the queen asked, "What do you call this animal?" So the captain of the ship brought the cat into the palace. Then more food was laid out, and the rats and mice appeared. As before, the cat immediately pounced, means jumped on that rats and mice, and killing at least a dozen before they scattered. So everyone was very happy to see this, and the queen asked to the captain of the ship, "What do you call this animal?" "Puss is the name. She answers too," said the captain. And when the queen called, "Puss, puss," the cat went over to her and purred. The queen was a little alarmed at first, as she had seen how fiercely the cat attacked the rats and mice. But the captain told her not to be anxious. "Puss is very friendly with people," he said, "and would soon rid your kingdom of rats and mice." So the captain of the ship answered to the queen that Puss is the name of the cat. And the queen was little alarmed at first, because she had seen how fiercely, how aggressively the cat had attacked the rats and mice. So that's why she was a little alarmed at first. But the captain told not to be anxious. Anxious means worry, not to be worried, because Puss is very friendly with people. So, and he said to her that would soon rid your kingdom of rats and mice. "I would give great wealth to own this animal," said the queen. So the queen said to the ship of the captain that, "I would give a great wealth to own this animal." So the captain began bargaining, and it was agreed that the king would pay the whole cargo from Mr. Fitzwarren's ship to pay a fine price for it. And for the cat alone, the king paid 10 times the sum again. So see, in this way, the price was decided of the ship and also the cat. So what was the price of the whole cargo? For that to pay a fine price for it, and for the cat alone, the king paid 10 times the sum again. When the ship came back to the port of London, the captain showed Mr. Fitzwarren the gold and the jewels he had brought from Barbary, and told him the story of the cat. The merchant sent for Dick. From now on, Dick, he said, we should all call you Mr. Whittington, for you are a rich man. Mr. Fitzwarren then paid him all the money the captain had received for the cat. So when the ship came back to the port of London, the captain showed Mr. Fitzwarren the gold and jewels that he brought from the Barbary, and they told him the whole story of the cat. So the merchant said to the Dick, from now on, we should all call you Mr. Whittington. When the ship came back to the port of London, the captain showed Mr. Fitzwarren the gold and jewels he had brought from Barbary, and told him the story of the cat. The merchant said for Dick. From now on, Dick, he said, we should all call you Mr. Whittington, for you are a rich man. Mr. Fitzwarren then paid him all the money that captain had received for the cat. So see here in this paragraph, when the ship came back to the port of London, the captain told the whole story to the Mr. Fitzwarren, and he brought the gold and jewels from the Barbary that he showed to the Mr. Fitzwarren. So the Mr. Fitzwarren said to the Dick that from now on we should all call you Mr. Whittington, for you are a rich man. So Mr. Fitzwarren then paid him all the money the captain had received for the cat. Now Dick became Mr. Whittington, as he became a rich man now because of his cat. From this on, Dick worked with Mr. Fitzwarren and became a successful merchant himself. He married Mr. Fitzwarren's daughter Alice, and 3 times he was elected Lord Mayor of London. He was also in time knighted by the king and became Sir Richard Whittington. He was not only famous, but he was popular too, for he always helped the poor with his money. Sometimes when he was old, he would tell his grandchildren the story of his cat, and how the bells of London had called him back when he was only a poor boy. Turn again, Whittington, thou worthy citizen, Lord Mayor of London. So, in the last paragraph, the Mr. Fitzwarren, Dick worked with Mr. Fitzwarren and became a successful merchant. And he married Mr. Fitzwarren's daughter Alice. And 3 times he was elected Lord Mayor of London. So whatever message passed out from the church bells, it becomes true now for the Dick, as he was elected Lord Mayor of London 3 times. And now he was knighted by a king also. Knighted means given a highly honored title. So now he was knighted by the king and become a Sir Richard Whittington. Now he was not only famous, but he was popular among the people because he was always helps the needy and poor people. So sometimes when he was old, he would tell his grandchildren the story of his cat and how the bells of London had called him back when he was only a poor boy. And again the message is given here. Turn again, Whittington, thou worthy citizen, Lord Mayor of London. So this message which passed out by the church bells, that becomes prove a very beneficial or useful towards Dick. Because of this message, the Dick turned again to Mr. Fitzwarren's house, and afterwards in his life, he became a successful merchant. He became successful because of his cat. And now he became also knighted by the king, the Sir Richard Whittington, and 3 times elected as a Lord Mayor of London. So from this story, we get the message that for the youngsters, that we must not run away from difficulties but face them bravely like a Dick. So in this way our lesson is finished here. I hope that everyone liked this message and whatever message conveyed through this story. I hope everyone understood this lesson. Thank you.